Even though you are sewing with a sewing machine, there are some situations where you might need to learn a bit of hand sewing as well, and the ladder stitch is one such hand sewing technique. First, let's see why we need the ladder stitch for. When making plushies, pillowcases, or even some cases scrunchies, you can top stitch the last bit of it using your sewing machine. But the problem is then it will be visible to the outside. If you're fine with it, you can stick with that, but if you want something better to close the gap, you can go for invisible ladder stitch. Now let's see how to do that. First of all, thread your hand needle with the matching thread color and make a knot at the end. I'm using a black color thread only to show you things clearly. Then also make sure the two folded seam areas on both sides are properly creased. You can iron that area a bit if it's possible, or you can just hand press it to have a bit of crease. This will surely help you going forward. Start with one of the gap ends and move from left to right or right to left depending on your preferred way. Now bring the needle up from the wrong side of the fabric, which is in between the folded fabric area of one of the sides. Your entry point has to be on the crease line and closer to where the machine stitching ended. Then pull the needle all the way, and this will hide away the knot nicely on the wrong side of the fabric. Next, find the point parallel and directly opposite to the first entry point on the other side of the gap. I usually keep the thread straight across and decide that point. Then go back down at that point on the crease and at the same time come up leaving a stitch length space on the crease line. Pull the needle towards you and you will get your first step on the ladder by doing that. Now it's time to switch to the other side of the gap and find the point which is parallel and directly opposite to the last needle entry point. Even here, I usually try to keep the thread straight across to find that point. Now from that point, go back down and come up in one motion, leaving a similar stitch length like we did earlier. Pull the thread and you'll get the second step of the ladder. Repeat the same steps by moving from one side of the gap to the other. As you can now understand, this is the reason why this stitch is named as ladder stitch. You make stitches resembling the steps on a ladder. Now think about what makes a proper ladder. First, the steps need to be located in similar intervals, and second, the steps have to be parallel to each other. Same goes for the ladder stitch, and for that, always try to find the parallel and directly opposite point when moving from one side to the other, and try to maintain similar spaces in between the stitches. If you find it difficult to keep similar intervals between the stitches, here's a small tip. Mark a small gap on your thumb and keep it as a guide to maintain the same space between the stitches. It doesn't have to be precise. Just try to do your best. Once you have made several stitches along the gap, you can now slowly pull the thread all the way, and as you can see, the gap is gonna enclose in that area, making an invisible ladder stitch. There are small black spots here and there only because I didn't use a matching thread color. So make sure to use a matching thread color and it will make a big difference. After this point, you can continue the ladder stitch along the gap until you reach the other end. If you have a longer area to cover, Make sure to slowly pull the thread all the way after every few stitches. Another important thing you need to consider in ladder stitch is always try to stay on the crease lines of both sides. That is because we already have a seam allowance we got from the machine sewing, and we need to keep it that way in this small area as well. By staying on the crease lines will make it easier to follow that same seam allowance. After you have reached the final part of the gap, keep it going until it's closer to where the machine sewed area starts again. From that point, slowly pull the thread to entirely close the gap. Now we can't leave it like this. We need to make a knot to secure the thread. For that, use the previous stitch or make a short new stitch to create a knot by going around it. Once it creates a loop, go through the loop and pull it to make a tight knot. You can make a second knot if you like to keep things safe and secure. After that, insert the needle close to where you made the knot and in between the two fabric layers. Come through only one of the layers and a little further away from your entry point. Now pull the thread towards you and trim it. This will hide away the hanging thread piece inside. This is how the invisible ladder stitch looks from the outside without leaving any trace. If you are someone who only uses your sewing machine and you are thinking of learning hand sewing, the ladder stitch has to be your first one to learn. Now if you are a plushie maker, you already know how important the ladder stitch is in plushie making. I don't know if you can remember this, but we used the ladder stitch in making this ghost plushie for Halloween. If you didn't get a chance to check that out, make sure to watch that one as well since we still got a few days for Halloween. Now let me show you what happens if you don't make much effort to keep even stitches or parallel stitches in your ladder stitch. Yes, it looks messy, but it will also enclose the gap once you slowly pull the thread towards you. The thing is, even though it enclosed the gap, it won't be smooth as the first one. You can clearly see that area is different from the other parts by looking from the outside. So try your best to keep things as smooth as possible. So that's all I know about the ladder stitch, and I hope you'll get some value out of this video. Now do you remember that I mentioned you may need to learn the ladder stitch when making scrunchies, but not these ones. I have a detailed tutorial on making these two-tone scrunchies without using the ladder stitch. So if you are interested, make sure to check that one as well, and I'll leave the link for that in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I'll join you in the next one.